Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
We are back and we are continuing our points talking about how to have a successful and happy marriage and partnership. And we have to thank all of you for the great feedback we've gotten on the first day's podcast about this topic. It's something that resonates with a lot of you. It certainly resonates with Julie and myself. And as always, we're going to continue with the points, and we're going to give these to you in the most drilled down, most practical way that we possibly can. And we want to thank you for giving us so much positive feedback. And also, I have to say I was pleased that no one really sent us any snarky comments too, because sometimes you talk about things that have really, and this does have religious undertones. It's for some reason people, they don't take it as intended. And really what we're hoping to provide for all of you guys are the rules that we've governed our 30-plus year marriage by, but not just our marriage, but also how we've worked together in multiple businesses and still do. And it wasn't easy at first, certainly, but when you're coming together as one, it never is. It's always going to be a little bit of, a little bit of effort. And we're going to share with you some more points that we have, not just that we used in our own relationship, I have to say, in our own business partnership, but also that we've since gone on to help other coaching clients utilize as well. And sometimes it's a couple, that are working together, a partnership or a marriage that are working together. And other times it's people, I'd say most of the time, truthfully, most of the time it's people who are having challenges with their spouse and they're looking for some relationship advice. And though it's not our purview necessarily, we want to stick mostly to focusing on real estate coaching. It is often something that we do have to help somebody with, because of the simple fact that if someone's having a hard time in their home, they're not going to be very motivated necessarily to be very successful in their business. And oddly enough, the people that are most successful in their businesses, generally speaking, are the ones that are conscious and apply a lot of these rules that Julie and I are going to share with all of you guys today. So take these as intended with love and care.
Yes. And if you feel yourself getting weirdly triggered by something, be introspective. Why did that happen? Take the points at face value, because that is how we intend them. And, a lot of these points, Tim, I was thinking as I reread through some of these, they also apply to being a good human so that you might find a good spouse. And, so it's not just about working together or just about marriage. These are also good life skills in general. So
I have to say, when we were writing these points, what Julie and I did before we even wrote our first point, because we've been working this on and off for, years, but when we wrote these notes, it was just the other day. And the first thing we wrote down is what we will tell Zoe when she's thinking about choosing a partner, a husband, how are we going to go about helping her make that decision, who she's going to partner with. And that was our motivation, really, because that centered us on how to keep things really practical and not too woo-woo, certainly, and also not too emotional, because oftentimes it's the emotions, it's leaning into a point that we made yesterday, Julie, and I think it's really important.
Sure.
That it's like, when you hear someone say you have to be passionate to be successful at something, or they say all those words that are just obviously heavy on the emotional side.
Follow your dream and the money will come.
Exactly. That stuff often, it sounds great in the short run, especially if you do have that type of passion, it works great. But think in terms of a relationship. If you have long-term relationships, especially with a partner or spouse, you know what I'm talking about. Everything starts out all hot and bothered, right?
Sure.
That's how humans bond to another human for the sake of, forming a mating pair, let's say.
Starts with attraction. Sure.
Exactly. And then over time, that feeling does change. It evolves into something else that's maybe, let's say, not as acute as it originally was when it was all about the initial forms of attraction, right? The infatuation and all the rest of it. And what is difficult for people to understand who have not had a long-term relationship, or really, I think Julie and I, frankly, have learned more from helping people who've wanted to have long-term relationships, and again, as coaching clients, and we've then suggested to them the different things that they might be wanting to employ in their relationships. But really, at the end of the day, the bottom line is over time, the nature of your relationship changes. It's, you will go in and out of the mad, passionate, this, that, and the other, but you will then replace that with something more profound. Your mission is not just to stay in this mad, passionate, irrational, high level of emotional state. Your mission is, when you're serious about having a long-term relationship, is to move towards something that's going to be long-term and sustainable and be more purposeful and really, frankly, going to make you far more happier and content over time.
Well, and a lot more depth and breadth to that relationship than just the initial attraction, too. So let's get to point number 4. If you missed the first 3 points, get caught up on yesterday's podcast. And point number 4, I would say this is in the top 5 for a reason. This comes up a lot with coaching clients and a lot with just different things we've read about marriage, etc. And that is point number 4, be financially responsible and on the same page regarding money. This means understanding your monthly overhead and being honest with it and being honest about it, your debt, your savings goals, your credit scores, and so on. Have monthly financial meetings with each other. Yes, be honest about your finances. Don't get behind on your taxes and use an accountant. There's a lot of financial mini points to that. But I've had coaching clients that have like secret accounts that their spouse doesn't know about, or accounts that they've forgotten about, but they're not talking about it.
Well, I mean, the financial thing, again, this is probably, they say it's the number one reason that people get divorced. Truthfully, I doubt that.
I think it's a major factor because it's something that's easy to argue about.
Well, exactly. That's what people lean into. They lean into the financial things, but really I think we're going to get to some of the more real reasons why we see a lot of people having marital problems. And maybe money's part of it, but money really is the icing on the other, the gross cake.
Being on the same page regarding money is an important thing.
So let's give them some practical tips with regards to that. We're big Dave Ramsey fans when it comes to basically getting your financial house in order. But as you accumulate more wealth, the Dave Ramsey system might be something that you'll find it doesn't necessarily grow. It doesn't scale up depending on your wealth situation. Because
it's a good start, like to get yourself out of debt in the first place.
It is. That's a great start. It's definitely follow the Dave Ramsey stuff. It's very practical.
Definitely.
It's very tactical. It's very similar to the advice that you guys, or what you're hearing from Julie and I. And also, as far as creating a financial plan that you can, that's really the most important, salient part of this last point, I think, is being on the same page as far as what the financial plans are. Expect there to be a lot of emotions attached to discussing money, because it's not something that people are used to doing.
Right, and nobody's really trained in financial maturity. It's not really a class that you have to take, even in college. High schools generally don't take it. A lot of parents don't talk about money with their kids.
Julie, people
can be a little weird about it.
Well, they don't talk about money. People will talk about their bowel movements and around friends before they'll talk about their finances.
Well, aren't we all brought up to not talk about politics, money, or religion at the table?
But who is it that doesn't want us to talk about finances? You ever wondered that? Why is it a taboo? Why is talking about money something that's considered a taboo?
That's a good question. What do you think?
We've done podcasts where we've touched about it before. And I want all the podcast listeners to actually think. There's tens of thousands of you listening. We, in society, will have these free-form conversations about everything and anything. Just think about what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
You name one thing right now that you will not be able to easily find some sort of conversation going on about anywhere that maybe even 36 months ago, let alone 5 years ago, or even 20 years ago, was a total taboo to talk about. And now all of these things are out in the open except talking about money. And when you talk about money, money is sort of like this place that all of a sudden you're supposed to have, you're not supposed to think about it. You're not supposed to feel any kind of, really at the end of the day, what it has to do with is control. Because if you are someone who's focused on financial independence and not being dependent on having a job, not being dependent on having to work for your money, getting to the point where you're, wealthy, where your money's working for you and you no longer work for your money, that means that you can opt out of really all the things that are designed to be control mechanisms of your life. So we did a number of podcasts about this, and just start out with this. If you were financially free, if you no longer had to work for your money was working for you, would you live where you live now? Would you vote for the people you vote for now? Would you read the books and have the friends? All the things in your life would change, guys.
Would you shop the way you shop? Or
exactly.
Do you talk yourself out of things, because you're afraid to want things. You're afraid to deal with that. You're afraid to even talk about it. I think it is, for a lot of people, a triggering emotion, if you will.
Sure it is.
On a lot of different levels. People will say, well, rich is evil or money is evil. It's the root of all evil. We did do a series of podcasts. I think it was called So You're Not Rich, Why Not?
Yeah.
Something like that.
You go back and listen to that because we really drilled down on it. But really the essence of it was really the cards are stacked against you. Well, I remember one of the points was nobody wants you to be rich, not even your mama.
Yeah.
Because really, at the end of the day, everyone likes to live in fear of not having money. And if you are let's say, government, and you want people to be dependent on you forever, the last thing you want those people to do is be financially independent, because then you don't have all the levers and the pulleys that you can be manipulating to make people feel beholden to dependent. And that is really the bottom line, in our opinion.
And everything is set up that way. I mean, look at how credit works, for example, right? So if you're financially independent and you don't really use credit, you're kind of opting out of that. So now the bank can't push you around and say, now you're going to pay points and more interest, and one thing leads to the next. So I think that you're right that wealth creates independence, and society is by and large set up for dependence.
Yeah, well, it's dependent on dependence, right?
Yes.
Society is dependent on people being dependent.
That's right.
Now, by society, I don't mean all of society, but I do mean basically the power structures that are out there. The obvious one being the government, but it's not just the government. The government's just a mirror of what's happening in society. It's everything wants you to be dependent, and the way they keep you dependent is keeping you in fear. And the best way of keeping you in fear, by the way, is keeping you in debt. Because you're going to keep doing jobs or having thoughts or voting for the people you're voting for because you need because you're financially dependent. That's why. So when it comes to money, you got to realize all money is. Money is a mechanism that allows you to be free. Money is a mechanism that allows you to think the thoughts you want to think when you want to think them. It's one of our rules, right? If you want ever increasing levels of success in your business and personal life, do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level. We're going to edit it for sometimes long damn periods of time, right?
Indeed.
For
sure longer than you think it will take.
But once you get there, once you start seeing the money flow, once you're starting to have money work for you, where you no longer have to work for money, it just comes in passively, and all of you can create that. Well, it starts right there at that thought, right? If you know you could create an alternative pathway forward where the money was coming in, where you didn't have to wait until you were 65, where you could live off your retirement and hopefully you can make ends meet. There are obviously lots of people that are breaking through and declaring their goal to be financially free. That's really where it starts. The idea that you can be independent. And then when you start realizing all the things that want you to be dependent, the point in that series of podcasts that we did really, I think, was salient. Nobody wants you to be rich, not even your mama, because when you're rich, all of a sudden you're not going to be like the tribe in which you're surrounded by.
Well, the birds of a feather flock together is true. And when you start to be a different looking bird, the other birds get nervous, right?
That's right.
So, just to keep it really practical. Now, again, we did speak a lot about this on that podcast series, but also in the second half of the Harris Rules book, and certainly in the treasure map. We help you get very clear on this if you're not already.
So let's give them some books.
Yes.
All right. So if you're wanting to basically unbury yourself, a good, I think, basis is going to be the Dave Ramsey stuff. Number 2, a great book that Julie and I really like that every single person we've ever referred it to hate, but we really love this book, but everyone else hates it. And it's called Profits Aren't Everything, They're the Only Thing. And I'll tell you the reason people hate it is because the book is basically about doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level.
There's a lot of accountability involved in that.
And there's a lot of accountability and there's a lot of sacrifice. And the author is not pulling punches with telling you what it takes to be a successful business owner. Again, it's Profits Aren't Everything. They're the Only Thing. Get that book. And I promise you'll hate it. And ask yourself why you hate it. It's really important. Yeah. The next one's going to be Harris Rules. And obviously that's our book. And we wrote that book with the idea that it was going to be a pathway forward for everybody with the ultimate goal, not just selling more houses or having more awards or being an influencer. Mm-hmm. The goal was for you to be financially independent, where you then could wake up every morning knowing that your financial needs are more than taken care of, and that you don't necessarily have to go out and do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do at the highest level. You can then choose where you want to live. You choose what your environment's going to be like, your people environment, your physical environment. You start having that.
It gives you freedom, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's what I'm describing. In your heart of hearts, if you're being completely honest with yourself, isn't that what you want more than anything?
If you're being honest, why you got your real estate license.
Well, it's like I look at our little daughter, though I'm supposed to call her big girl now.
Big girl.
But I look at big girl Zoe, who's 8, right? And I look to see what she wants more than anything. And I look to see Julie and I are watching her, and we see, of course, society is trying to mold her into being a good citizen, which of course means being a good gear in somebody else's machine. And Julie and I are pulling her in the other direction, not overtly to the point where she's going to be confused, but you guys can imagine. And we're seeing this societal thing to try to put her into some sort of gear
Pathway.
thing where she's going to be doing this and she's going to be serving this role in life. None of it has anything to do with being financially independent. None of it has anything to do with the idea that she could be in true control of her destiny.
But what is her core desire? It's absolutely
to be
freedom.
free.
Yes.
And
So don't lose that, guys.
Thank
Don't
you
lose
for
that.
reeling me in on that point.
okay.
Yeah, every kid's goal, your goal, was not to have to. I mean, Julie, okay, you were sitting in the car this morning, or is it yesterday morning, and she was having her breakfast, and all the kids, and basically she was almost late to school. What did she tell you?
Yeah, she goes, I like being late. And I said, why is that, Zoe? She goes, the less school, the merrier. All righty then. I got it. She's like, and today, yet again, I think she was the last kid in the door.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a smart kid.
I know.
But
we had a nice time in the truck before we went in.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, now to keep it, again, to reel it in to be practical and tactical, also get the real estate treasure map, because that is your, basically your workbook to start getting really clear on your financial plan, right? And part of that too, that we do
let's tell them how.
Yes, go ahead. Whatever the easiest way.
Yeah, guys, just text the word Harris, our last name, to 47372, and we'll text you back a link to download the real estate treasure map.
For free.
For free, right? And it is a completely done for you, fill in the blank business and life plan. We use this. We update it now twice a year. Well, we update it monthly. It's what we use to keep ourselves on track. Matter of fact, we had one of these meetings this morning after we went to the gym. So that is something we use. We'll suggest you use it as well. So if you want a copy of it, it's free. Just text our last name, Harris, to 47372. Text our last name, Harris, to 47372.
Yes, and one last thought on that. While you're working on your treasure map, it's good for you to get used to using mint.com, because that is a great financial dashboard for you to keep track of everything. You only have to enter it in once.
Yep, it's very cool.
It updates for you. It is really cool, and I think that's free too.
Yeah, it's free. And you can go and have, like, we use Mint. It's our KPIs. It's our financial dashboard. We can go in there. It keeps track of the value of most of our rental properties using Z estimates. So, who knows what the real values are.
But you can modify that per your own CMA.
Yeah, and any other assets you have, it'll actually go into any retirement accounts you have and things like that. But start with the idea that your heart's truest, where you're going to be the happiest. If you want to have an opportunity to be that person inside of you that you've always wanted to be, obviously health matters, relationships matter, all those types of things matter. But the thing that matters the most is being financially free. Because you could have great health and great relationships, but if you're stuck doing a job, or if you're stuck essentially always having to be under the yoke of financial stress, then you guys can kind of see where that has you end up. You don't have time to enjoy the things that you want to enjoy, and those things go away. So you're in business for yourself. You are smart enough to get a real estate license. This is probably one of the best times in the history of real estate to be in the real estate industry. You need to realize this is not just about making ends meet. You think bigger and start thinking in terms of being financially free. All right, point number 5.
Point number 5, this is also a big one. Take care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. Take care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. Don't change the rules by getting lazy or complacent, especially physically. And this is a pretty direct point. If you become unattractive to your spouse, you are the problem in the relationship. Now, I will put a caveat to this, because I know a lot of ladies who have had 3, 4, or 5 kids, and that's different. Or if you're sick or you have surgery, that's not what I'm talking about.
I'm so glad you read this point and not me.
I know, because people take it the wrong way.
They will.
I'm not talking about if you're fighting a disease, or you have COVID right now, heaven forbid, or you just gave birth. I'm talking about on a regular, normal scenario. Don't be the unattractive one to your spouse, right? Now, this can manifest in a lot of different ways. You've seen it with coaching clients too.
But let's be
and friends.
But let's be specific.
Sure.
We're not saying you have to look this way.
No.
Because, who knows, right? People are attracted to different things. So whatever. What we're saying is, when you got married, when you were dating, how you looked is what that was the
attractor factor.
That's the box you came in.
Yes.
And that's what they married. And if you have changed, or that's what they chose as the partner. And if you have all of a sudden, when they got home after a few years, the thing that they thought they brought home wasn't what they expected.
Right, or someone who they wouldn't expect now. They wouldn't date now. They wouldn't marry now.
Exactly.
You can't change the rules to that degree.
And you can't say, well, they'll love me anyway, even though when we got married I was 120 pounds.
That's very assumptive.
And now I'm 220 pounds. That is not
right.
What that is not doing. And this is an offensive point for some of you. I get it. But the reality of it is what you're doing is you're changing the rules. you're then creating here's the mess. What is the message you're sending to your spouse? Like if I were let's say Julie is in great shape. She goes to the gym every day. By the way, we are posting on Instagram at Tim and Julie Harris. Yeah, I am. We're trying to be accountable to all of you and post on Instagram at Tim and Julie Harris our workout. And yesterday, Julie had a great picture that she took with Ricky Martin. So if you are wanting to see that picture, go over to Tim and Julie Harris and actually then obviously follow us on Instagram. And you can see it. We're, again, putting pictures up almost every day of us hating going to the gym, but we go there every day.
Doing what we don't want to do when we don't want to do it.
But let's say Julie and I got married. When we got married, we were, both great shape. And over the years, I've become somebody who's not in great shape. Julie stays in great shape. Didn't I, in a way, betray the commitment I made to her about keeping myself in a certain physical, making myself look good for her? Aren't I, in a way, disrespecting the relationship that we have for her, or I had with her? Doesn't that, in a lot of ways, send the wrong message to your spouse or your partner when you stop caring about yourself? When you stop wanting to look attractive? Why would they care about
you if you don't care about yourself, right?
And Julie said it right. I mean, would you have married the person or the person that married you had you had today's rendition? I'm probably not, or maybe you would have. What's wrong with getting married and then getting in better shape every year? What's wrong with getting married and improving your finances every year? Why is it there's sort of this societal expectation? And I have to say, it doesn't cross all. It's mostly, if we're being completely honest, it's mostly a, what am I going to say? A demographic, if you will, or not even demographic.
Probably more than not.
A financial thing.
Yeah, I would think that's true.
Yeah. So what happens, and Julie and I, we grew up, and I've mentioned this a number of times. I grew up on the poor side of the block. Julie grew up on the middle class side of the block. And the expectation was, as you got older, you saw this in your family, you'll see this in your neighbors and your relatives. People get a little bit fatter, they get a little bit slower, they have a tendency not to necessarily accumulate wealth. They retire, they have to sell their house, they have to move to the other thing.
Their beer intake goes up.
Exactly, right. So the expectation is subconsciously, because you're in that environment and because your parents are in that environment, because your siblings are in that environment, that's the same path you're going to follow. So what you do subconsciously is you start mirroring the environment in which you find yourself within. And since this point is about your physicality and your mental and your emotional states, that's what happens. You start mirroring the environment.
Well, especially if your friends are being that way too.
Right.
Everybody around you is like that, and the job that you have is like that. But you can turn that around. One of the things that I really enjoy watching from our Orange Theory fitness friends, especially back in Georgetown where we used to work out, there's a lot of couples who decide that enough's enough. They're still committed to each other. They're going to make a change together.
Do you remember that couple we used to work out with? He was a police officer.
Yes, that's who I had in the back of my mind.
What was their names? Do you remember their names?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I'll remember.
Mike was his name.
Yes.
Right? And I don't remember her name.
I'll tell you in a minute.
Anyway, so they
That is who I was flashing in my head.
I saw them post yesterday that she just ran without stopping.
Mm-hmm.
How many miles was it? It was incredible.
It was a lot.
Well, the only reason we were remembering them is because we both saw it yesterday.
Yeah, but they're doing it as a couple is my point.
And I remember when we first started going to Orange Theory. And
Rachel, Susan.
That's right. And they started going to Orange Theory at the same time. Both of them were large. And over time of going to Orange Theory, they became in really great shape to the point now where they're in really great shape. But I remember we used to hang out with them because they were a really great couple who were working together to try to improve their physicality.
And they're very supportive of each other, too.
Exactly. And that's the thing that was really special to see is both of them getting in shape together. And then, obviously, their relationship is improving along the way because they're being very encouraging of each other.
Justin and Celeste are another example of that.
Yeah, and both you and I we used to love competing with both of those couples.
I know, especially those two.
Even though they were a lot younger than us.
Yeah, but I think the point to all this and our, support of that is that, first of all, it doesn't have to be too late if you're in this situation. You can turn it around. And secondly, there's a common theme to all of our points, not just the ones we've already presented, but going forward, and that is being on the same page, right? Because if both of you are out of shape and you've kind of let yourselves go and only one of you makes the commitment to get your act back together, well, then the other person's going to go through a series of emotions and not get caught up or feel bad about it, not be on the same page, and that doesn't really solve anything.
Well, so let's give them some coaching on this because the typical scenario is we won't have both spouses or partners or whatever on a coaching call. It'll be one or the other, right? And it'll be like I want my wife and I or my husband and I, we're become basically out of shape and we're not having sex anymore and all the kinds of things come up on coaching calls and we're not. It's not the relationship we want to have, and we're just sort of growing old, not so gracefully. And I want my wife or I want my husband to start getting in shape and support me when I go to. And so here's the marital advice for all of you guys. And by the way, this has been maybe a technique I've done in our marriage. This work with Mrs. Harris is that you start doing it without saying a damn thing. You start getting in better shape. You start actually be the leader, and then the other person will not necessarily follow, but they'll see that you're doing it. The worst thing you can do oftentimes is try to coach or prod or manipulate the other person to do it. You just start doing it. Like when Julie and I signed up for Orange Theory, here's what we did. We didn't know what Orange Theory was necessarily. We thought it was a gym. Julie and I walked up to the thing. And,
I figured there'd be orange juice.
Right. And they were going to give us some long pitch, and they told us they were a gym and this is what they do. And I said, they wanted to give us a tour and explain how the equipment worked. And we were like, we don't care. Just sign us up. Now, that is the way that we made a commitment together to start doing it. And then afterwards, Julie kind of panicked because she realized what we just signed up for.
Exactly. We're going to do what?
Yeah, exactly. Every day. But it really, really did work. So when you're in a marriage and you're recognizing the fact that you want to get yourself back in shape and you want to start being more attractive and you want your spouse to be more attractive to you. And I do mean physically and I do mean sexually, because there's a lot of things that follow that. When you start getting your body in shape, your mental state will improve as well. And I mean physiologically, that's true.
You can't be lazy about things mentally or emotionally if you are not lazy about things physically. It just is impossible because it's incongruent.
So here's the point I was trying to make earlier. I have noticed that the wealthier somebody is, okay, the less likely they are to be fat.
That's generally true.
Okay, why is that?
I think it gets down to that same discipline that I was talking about.
That's what it is.
Fiscal discipline. And well, I can tell you, you know this for a fact. Our most successful coaching clients, what do we mean by successful? They're meeting or exceeding the goals that they have set, which means that they have set goals, get the treasure map, okay? But the most successful coaching clients, as defined that way, are successful financially, physically, mentally, spiritually. They have great marriages.
Because it all works together.
They're raising great kids. They're happy. They're moving forward. If you call them at 3 o'clock in the morning, they can tell you what they're working on. They're excited all the time. And I think I can't name a single coaching client that has it together in one of those things only, right? That is only good at, being a listing agent, because the discipline it takes to be a great listing agent follows through to, say, working out.
The disciplines of going to Orange Theory every day, the discipline of working consistently in your business, doing the real work of real estate, the discipline of being financially responsible, the discipline of the next points we're going to talk about with regards to essentially working on your being an interesting person, things like that. All of these things work in hand. So here's for example. You're going to go, maybe you're not in great shape. You haven't really done any exercise in a long time. Here's an idea. Start by going on walks, and just walks. They don't even have to be long walks.
Be consistent about it.
And listen to podcasts. And don't listen to podcasts about the crap that you're watching at home on CNBC or at Fox News, okay? You got to start allowing yourself to be completely media free. Listen to this podcast. Listen to things that are going to make you a more interesting person. And along the way, you're going to stumble across other people that are literally walking the exact same path as you, who are also trying to improve themselves. And now you got some friends. Now you're, from a real estate perspective, you're expanding your centers of influence and past clients. Now you're feeling a little bit more confident. Get your butt to a local gym where there's group workouts where you're going to make friends. It's the reason we're huge advocates of, guess what, Orange Theory. And then start doing that like we prescribed on a regular basis, and you'll expand your centers of influence and past client list even more. Then what happens is your finances improve. If you're somebody who's taking care of yourself physically, chances are making yourself do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do at the highest level in your real estate business, as we prescribe to you as being a coaching client, will become second nature. Definitely. Because you're rewiring your brain.
Yes,
you're
and
changing
you
your
become
reality.
less resistive to
Exactly.
it. And you also get a lot more support along the way. So here's the thing, because some of them are freaking out. Oh my God, I can't imagine being on a treadmill.
Go slow.
You don't have to be, like breaking records right out of the gate. That would be unrealistic expectations. Believe me when I tell you, our first, months even at Orange Theory were not the same as our workout today. But you do, what's the saying? You don't have to see every step on the ladder. You just have to take the first step and keep climbing. just take the first step. Start out, like you said, you can start out with a walk, but
Well,
do
don't
it every
overthink
day. Do it every day, and don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate. Well, I signed up for the gym, but there's 20 feet of snow on the ground. Well, figure out a different way to work out.
And again, this is the reason why we suggest you put yourself in environments that will be making
Supportive.
up for that'll be making up for maybe a little bit of your mental weakness as you're trying to essentially improve yourself. That's the reason we suggest you go to an organized gym. That's the reason we suggest you join our coaching program. By the way, for those of you who are smart and want to join our coaching program, just text the word Premier to 47372. Text the word Premier to 47372. Remember, message and data rates may apply. And for those of you who are wanting to, have a distinct plan to go forward in your business, you're going to want to probably join eXp Realty. You're going to want to read our book, Harris Rules. Why would you try to recreate the wheel? Reinforce your life with things that are going to pull you in the direction that you want to go. Maybe it's only a mental thought. I want to be a different person. I want to have more, be more, have, everything in my life I know I can improve. You are being honest with yourself, and you're saying you are not the version of yourself that you thought you'd be at the age in which you are. Change it, but reinforce the change that you want to make, because otherwise the weight, the yoke, the mooring lines of where you're at now, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, certainly financially, they're going to pull you back. So you're going to have to attach yourself to something that's going to pull you, maybe more than you want to be pulled in some cases, in the direction that you want to go. And it's really important that you do that, because then it's one thing will reinforce the other.
That's it. Well, I think we have time for one more point.
We do.
Okay, point number 6. Don't be uninteresting. That's another word for boring. Similar to being unattractive, don't become boring or stuck mentally. Study things that make you engaging. Continue to upgrade your intellectual horsepower. Actually become more interesting to your spouse as you progress through life together. If you're not, you're being very complacent about your relationship, about yourself mentally. And, I'm working on a podcast maybe about this, the Da Vinci principles that I refer to sometimes. I find that that's a good guide to being interested in things. And it doesn't have to be just in your normal real estate wheelhouse. In fact, I think that it's better if it's not. If you have things that you study, like what's going on with mortgages, and know your craft, but also look outside of that. And I have different little things that I try and follow, like I like historic architecture and house stuff, right? So that can be interesting and useful, but also things that are completely random but interesting. Well, and you do the same thing. You're always telling me about car stuff, or we study things that together, and I'll tell you things about raising an 8-year-old that I read. But don't become uninteresting.
Well, and why? From a practical perspective, because that's what we're always about, you're going to be able to have more conversations about different topics with different sorts of people. Otherwise, you're just going to end up having the same conversation about, the Super Bowl.
It's boring, and you get stuck.
And you're only going to attract certain people that are interested in the Super Bowl, where, you're going to, if you start exploring other things and opening your mind to what an incredible, world this is that we all live in, how blessed all of us are. And again, especially since you're in the real estate industry, if you start expanding your mind, expanding your thinking, you're going to have to be aggressive, brutal about detaching yourself from all of the really disgusting garbage that's out there right now.
And there is a lot of it.
And there's a lot of it. It's unbelievable how politicized things have gotten. You're going to have the courage to check out in order to save yourself, in order to preserve your future potential. You're going to have to say, I do not want to have political conversations anymore. We got great advice a long time ago before we got into real estate from a guy named Jack Rosselli. Mm-hmm. And there was basically the gist of it is when it comes to politics, and this guy is a very, at least in our world, very famous, and somebody we've definitely respected. Like I said, he was, I think, an involuntary mentor of ours.
I think so too.
He didn't know he was
especially back then.
Right. And he said, be a Republicrat. Be a Republicrat. Now, this is something Julie and I followed, and you hear us on this podcast, making sure we're walking that line. Be a Republicrat. See both sides of the argument. Don't be partisan on one side or the other. Now, what's fascinating is everyone for years, when Julie and I were coaching, would be like, yeah, that makes sense. I want to be able to work with everybody. But something happened in the last 3 years that when Julie and I have said in front of groups of people, be a Republicrat, you'll have people who will say, no, you have to think the way I think. Now, they don't say it like that, but that is what they're saying. Yeah. And it can be on either the left or the right side.
And they'll go to the mat over it.
They'll go to the mat over it. I have to convince the world that everyone's exactly the way I think. They're not, again, saying these words, if that's how they're expressing themselves. But I did have somebody once, a lady who described herself as an old hippie, once told me something, which I thought actually was a really good point. She said in her world, everybody, and again, her words, is an old hippie. And so she said, being that she's in a community, San Francisco, where everyone's like her, everyone thinks like her, and this is where she wants to do real estate, it doesn't benefit her to be nonpartisan. She said, in her world, if you're nonpartisan, if you're not partisan towards the left side of the political range, she said she'll actually run people off from wanting to do business with her. But she said she accepted.
But she recognized it.
Yeah, and I thought it was hilarious. What was funny to me was that she totally and completely understood and agreed with the point, but was telling me why in her world that wasn't a practical approach if her goal was to serve people in the real estate needs.
Sure.
And I thought that was a great point.
And there are some areas that are like that.
But
the thing is that she was aware of it and she made a conscious decision of how she would operate.
It was awesome. I loved it.
That's respectable.
But in most of your worlds, that's not the way it actually works. In most of your worlds, you're going to be tripping over people that are a little this, a little the other thing. Maybe they're too far this way or too far that way. So you want to be nonpartisan because it'll work against you. Yeah. Maybe in some environments you can be this way, and maybe other environments you can't. Just do not participate.
It's better to just be a Republican because you shouldn't be posting things that are overtly one way or the other because you don't know who your next prospect's going to be. They go and Google you, and maybe they even slightly disagree with whatever you just posted. And you wonder why they ghost you. They're not calling you back. They've already formed an opinion. So you have to stop doing that. But let's get back to our point. Don't be uninteresting. Study different things, right? Broaden your education. And I do this with coaching clients as an excuse to be more interesting, to expand their listing prospects, right? So a lot of agents let's make it really practical. A lot of agents are afraid to go up market because they get intimidated. They're uncomfortable out of their own price range. Most agents, once you're at the price range over what they're living in, they won't prospect, they won't call it back, they won't hang out in center of influence crowds like that because it's just out of their wheelhouse, right? So one of the things that you can do is preview more so you know what houses like that are like, but maybe when you walk into some, it's 3 times what your average sale price is, and you see their art collection, you're able to comment on that.
Let's tell them what we did.
Yes, so lots of different versions of it.
When we started out in real estate, we were in our early 20s. We bought our first house when we were 22 and 23 as our first investment property. We started selling real estate not long after that. And our average sale price was, guess what, like many of you, the houses in our neighborhood that were similarly priced. And it was easy to work with people like that because they're just like us, earning the same amount of money, have the same experiences in life, and it was all very simple. And we sold 103 houses our first year, and we sold between 100 and 200 homes every year after that. But it was something that we knew we were holding ourselves back. It was easy. It was did not require much. I mean, easy implies it doesn't require a lot of effort, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But skills-wise, it was easy.
Sure, it was a good learning ground.
The business was coming to us.
Yeah.
But we wanted, and we knew we had more capacity. So across town, there was this gorgeous area called New Albany Country Club. In New Albany Country Club, if you guys have never, it's still probably the best master plan community in the United States.
I would agree. We just visited it on our U.S. tour.
We did. And we were there and we were going like, holy crap, this is nice.
I know.
Okay, so here's the story. So Julie and I sold real estate for a while in this normal area where we grew up. We knew everybody. Julie's dad was a teacher.
Totally normal, middle of the
road. Her mom was a
road.
teacher. It was normal for us to trip across people who knew us or somehow were connected. And that makes sense, right? That's where you're going to form your real estate business. So what we did, we decided, you know what? We can be working across town in a place that's a half hour, 45 minutes away. And the average sale price there was 4X what we were selling where we were from.
And on up from there.
Right. Started at 4X. And we thought, well, you know what? We have to work our asses off to sell 150 houses a year. And this is how much money we earn. I wonder how much easier it would be, or what would have to change. How would we have to change to work across town? So we went, and every weekend we would drive out there and we'd park our car. And we would, we're kind of trespassing if we're being honest. we would park our car in some place where, it was legal. And we'd walk in the community and we'd walk around on the walking paths. We'd walk around the golf course. We'd go around and we would meet the people and say hi. They didn't know whether we were visiting.
And we'd go to open houses and we'd look at the golf course and we'd check out the country club and we'd go to the horse events and we started to learn that community.
We did. We started to learn it. We went to met the builders.
Yeah, the parade of homes and stuff.
Looked at all the maps. We started learning about Georgian and federal architecture. We started understanding all the nuances, things of the community. And so we started to actually go out there and breathe the air. Now, I'll even make it more interesting. I think it's more interesting. not only did we not have any familial contacts there, we had no educational contacts, and most of the community were Jewish people, and we're not Jewish.
No social contacts at all.
No social contacts. Most of the realtors, I think actually there are no exceptions to this, grew up in the community. They went to school with each other. They went to Vail every, third weekend
In other
on
words,
the private
we really
jets.
had no business being there.
Hell no. And they never wasted any time telling us that we had no
true.
business being there. They hated us
That's
being
true.
there. And so here's what we did. We went out there. We got to know the community. It was a place that we were completely fish out of water. And we then what did we do? Believe it or not, Julie was 29 years old, and I'm a year older than her. And so we actually bought a house out there. So we moved out there. We had this very stable, consistent real estate business in this area that we grew up. It was producing very consistent income. We didn't ditch that business. We didn't publicly announce we're moving across town because we didn't want to alienate those customers, obviously. But we then moved to New Albany, physically moved to New Albany. We bought this big, beautiful Georgian house. And I remember celebrating. The title company when Julie turned 30, they put a happy birthday Julie sign in our front yard. Remember that?
I do.
Yeah. Anyway, so why am I telling you all this? Why am I telling you all this? I got off my story.
Well, knowledge equals confidence, ignorance equals fear. So
Yeah.
if you want to be more interesting in your real estate career, start studying things that have to do with real estate and further your real estate career.
But here's what we realized is that, and I'm back on track now.
Good.
I was just picturing your sign when you turned 30, by the way. That's what I was thinking about. So we were able to apply the exact same discipline skills, scripts, listing presentation, every single thing that we did to sell, thousands of homes of normal price ranges in that more exclusive market. Everything translated exactly.
Yes, but it was also more competitive.
Well,
it
I
was
disagree.
For a while out of our wheelhouse, but we learned it is the point.
I disagree. It was not more competitive. In the lower price range, it was 1,000x more competitive. In the upper end price range, it was more exclusive. But what happened was when we started calling the expireds and we started pursuing the sellers, and we had a formal listing presentation, when we were calling people back right away, when we were actually working hard versus like being gone in the summer because we're in Paris like most of our competitors,
That's true.
they then started listing with us. So it was more competitive in the sense that it was harder to get into the market.
That's what I meant by that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But it was less competitive in the sense that the agents that we were competing against, once they basically were out of social connections, their skill set was very low.
Pretty complacent.
And their average sale price was so high that they didn't have to get better. They would sell one house or 10 houses a year and make what we were making, probably selling 100 houses. You guys get the difference?
Well, you learn a lot selling 100 houses a year.
Yeah, and here's the thing that really was fascinating. The sellers in that marketplace, when those expireds would happen, and the expireds were happening in New Albany, and you'd see like the listings would just pop between the top 3 agents that were there. And Julie and I were nobody, right? So you'd see the listing would go from Bob, then Bob wouldn't sell it, and they'd go to Susie, and Susie wouldn't sell it, and it would go to Steve, and Steve wouldn't sell it. And then it would rotate back around.
Yep.
And these sellers didn't really feel like they had any options other than just listing with these, embedded agents. And then Julie and I would go out there. Those expires would pop up. Nobody was working the expires, which you'll find in the upper end markets.
Definitely
Most
true.
agents don't have the courage to work expires. So Julie and I were out there working the expireds, calling, door knocking, doing whatever it took, got in front of the sellers, and guess what happened? We absolutely went aggressively after the market starting in third quarter of one year, and we called all the expireds. And all these expireds, when you call them, they always said the same thing. We're going to relist with the same agent in the spring. We would get a listing appointment, and we ended up listing, I think, like 10 or 12 of these mega mansions.
They were awesome.
And here's what happened.
was
I'll
so
never
much
forget
fun.
this. We had the contract signed. They all wanted to wait till the snow melted because snow in Columbus, Ohio is real.
real.
Yeah, and then the spring, the tulips started coming up, and then all of a sudden, along with the tulips, our for sale signs were in all these listings. And I remember those realtors were just shocked that we were able to do what we did, and we never let.
That's because we were working when
Yeah.
nobody else was, and because we were working harder than anyone else was in terms of hunting it down, right?
For sure, we didn't take it for granted.
That's it. And we would hear that quite a few times.
But when you were, to the point of being interesting, what we were doing is when we were walking around, when we were getting to know the community, we were getting to know the people. We were getting to know what they were interested in, and then we became interested in what they were interested in. That way, when we were starting to talk to them, we would be able to talk to them and relate to them like they wanted to be related to.
No longer a fish out of water.
Exactly. We made it so that we weren't a fish out of water. We were not born in that community or born at that level of, social influence or any of that stuff. We learned to be like them. And sure enough, what we discovered is they appreciated the fact that we were putting in all this extra effort, even though they knew we didn't go to the private schools. We didn't go to Ivy League schools. We didn't grow up on yachts. We didn't grow up on private jets. We didn't have houses in the Hamptons. We didn't do all this. This was all abnormal to us. And over time, the sellers who did raise their kids to be entitled little princesses and princes, they appreciated the fact that we were scrappers. And we had them tell us that.
Absolutely. Many, many times they told us
They
that.
did.
They would say things like, you're the only agent that I don't see on the golf course that's out there working it. We would have open houses. That neighborhood was not a big open house community.
Never.
And we would slam the open houses because everybody was curious about those big, beautiful homes, right?
And then they became curious about us.
Yes. And so one thing led to the next. And this is what I'm talking about. Educate yourselves. Knowledge equals confidence. Ignorance equals fear. If you're not doing things like that, it may be out of ignorance, which makes sense that you would be fearful of it. You can change that. If we could change that when we were 29 and 30 years old, you guys can change it. And you have so many more tools at your disposal that we didn't have back then.
That's true. And so this is all related to relationship advice. Hopefully you guys are seeing this. How to have a successful, happy marriage and partnership. We're just demonstrating for you what we did to make it so, and keeping it practical. Don't become uninteresting for the sake of your partner not being interested in you, but also in your quest to become more of an interesting person, you're going to attract different type of people to you, so then you can become more versatile and actually have a broader swath of
more interesting conversations.
Real estate clients. Exactly. Sure. And so this is all hand in glove. Do you guys see how the improvement in one thing improves all the other aspects as well? Do you guys see how this is really, and I know for some of you, because Julie and I mean, we weren't always in great shape. We were fat at one point.
Yeah.
We
well,
were.
After a few years in real estate, having pizza at 10 o'clock at night after a listing presentation, it does catch up with you after a while.
We haven't had a pizza in years.
I know. But back then it did, and we had to do something about it.
And everyone else is standing in line picking up their pizzas too. I mean, so it's totally normal for everyone to have a pizza belly.
Yeah.
It is what you did.
For sure.
But we, so we know what it's like. We have experienced what it's like to essentially start less than zero. We know what it's like to be completely a fish out of water. We know what it's like to have to rebuild, which is what some of you are going to have to do. But you can do it. Don't give up on yourselves. You only live once and you're dead a real long time. Some of you find that comforting. Others of you find it offensive. But I find it truthful. You only live once and you're dead a real long time. Make the most of the life you have. Don't take any of it for granted. Don't live in fear. Don't let other people manifest their fear or their desire to control you through giving you their fears. That's not really why you were put on this planet. Reattach to your inner 8-year-old when you wanted to be just a little bit late so you could have a little bit more freedom for just a few extra seconds later every single morning.
Literally seconds. We watch down to the clock.
Yeah, but I mean, that really is a good point, I think.
Yeah,
good place to level off. Oh, by the way, if you guys are interested in joining eXp Realty, it's probably the single greatest wealth creation vehicle ever created for real estate agents. If you're just getting started to learn about eXp Realty, I want you to text the letters EXP, just the letters EXP to 47372. This is way more than about brokerage, way more about commission splits, way more than all the things that you think when you think of real estate brokerage. eXp really is a vehicle for you to create true financial freedom. Text the letters EXP to 47372. And if you're ready to choose a sponsor, you're ready to move forward, and you would like to have Julie and I as your sponsor, we are formally applying for the job of being your eXp sponsor. So if you've not chosen a sponsor and you would like Julie and I to be your sponsor, we'd love the opportunity to interview for the job, right?
Yes, indeed.
And text me directly, and this is my real cell phone, at 512-758-0206. 512-758-0206. In the meantime, guys, thank you for the positive feedback. Please like us on, were they supposed to like us? On iTunes, subscribe on YouTube.
Follow us on Instagram.
Smoke signals. I mean, all the,
that's fine.
if you don't know about any of this.
We are not hard to find.
Yeah, we're not hard to find. But do please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really does help. We're on Stitcher, on Spotify. We're on all the major podcast listening devices. And guys, thank you for continuing to make this the #1 listened to podcast for real estate agents, #1 daily podcast. We really do appreciate your feedback. We love it when you guys give us suggestions for show ideas. We love it when you tell us we're on target, we're on track. Got a lot of people that are saying this relationship stuff is really helping you to give you some, hopeful direction in your business and personal relationships. And we appreciate that feedback because it tells us more of what you want. So please reinforce that. If you have any show ideas, any topics, feel free to message me on Instagram, and we're at Tim and Julie Harris obviously, or you can just text me at 512-758-0206. In the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.